Ah, welcome. Warm yourself by the fire. Have a seat or snuggle up in your favorite spot and let me tell you a story. The White Lady of Rownam Avenue, near Stirling, by Elliott O'Donnell. Like most countries, Scotland claims its share of phantasms in the form of white ladies. According to Mr. Ingram in his Haunted Houses and Family Legends, the ruins of the mansion of Woodhouseley are haunted by a woman in white, presumably, though personally I think otherwise, the ghost of Lady Hamilton of Bothwellhaug. This unfortunate lady, together with her baby, was, during the temporary absence of her husband, stripped naked and turned out of doors on a bitterly cold night by a favorite of the Regent Murray. As a result of this inhumane conduct, the child died, and its mother, with the corpse in her arms, was discovered in the morning raving mad. Another instance of this particular form of apparition is to be found in Sir Walter Scott's White Lady of Avenel, and there are endless others, both in reality and fiction. Some years ago, when I was putting up at a friend's house in Edinburgh, I was introduced to a man who had had several experiences with ghosts, and had therefore been especially asked to meet me. After we talked together for some time, he related the following adventure which had befallen him in his childhood in Rownam Avenue, the seat of Sir E.C., near Stirling. I was always a lover of nature, he began, and my earliest reminiscences are associated with solitary rambles through the fields, dells, and copses surrounding my home. I lived within a stone's throw of the property of old Sir E.C., who has long gone to rest, God rest his soul, and I think it needs blessing, for if there was any truth in local gossip, he had lived a very queer life. Indeed, he was held in such universal awe and abhorrence that we used to fly at his approach, and never spoke of him amongst ourselves, saving in such terms as Old Dour Crab or the Lord Devil. Rownam Manor House, where he lived, was a fine specimen of 16th century architecture, and had it been called a castle, would have merited the appellation far more than many of the buildings in Scotland that bear that name. It was approached by a long avenue of giant trees, elms, oaks, beeches that, uniting their branches overhead in summertime, formed an effectual barrier to the sun's rays. This avenue had an irresistible attraction for me. It literally swarmed with rabbits and squirrels, and many are the times I have trespassed there to watch them. I had a very secure hiding place in the hollow of an old oak, where I have often been secreted while Sir E.C. and his keepers, without casting a glance in my direction, passed unsuspectingly by, vowing all sorts of vengeance against trespassers. Of course, I had to be very careful how I got there, for the grounds were well patrolled, and Sir E.C. had sworn to prosecute anyone he caught walking in them without his permission. Had Sir E.C. caught me, I should doubtless have been treated with the utmost severity, since he and my father were the most bitter opponents politically, and for that reason, unreasonable though it be, never lost an opportunity of insulting one another. My father, a strong radical, was opposed to all big land proprietors, and consequently winked his eye at my trespassings. But I think nothing really would have pleased him better than to have seen me brought to book by Sir E.C., since in my defense he would have had an opportunity of appealing to the passions of the local people, who were also radicals, and of incensing them still further against the principles of feudalism. But to continue, I had often heard it rumored in the village that Rownam Avenue was haunted, and that the apparition was a lady in white, and no other than Sir E.C.'s wife, whose death at a very early age had been hastened, if not entirely accounted for, by her husband's harsh treatment. Whether Sir E.C. was really as black as he was painted, I've never been able to ascertain. The intense animosity with which we all regarded him made us believe any ill of him, and we were quite ready to attribute all the alleged hauntings in the neighborhood to his past misdeeds. I believe my family, with scarcely an exception, believed in ghosts. Anyhow, the subject of ghosts was so often discussed in my hearing that I became possessed of an ungovernable curiosity to see one. If only the White Lady would appear in the daytime, I thought, I should have no difficulty in satisfying this curiosity. But unfortunately, she did not appear until night. In fact, not long after boys of my age had been ruthlessly ordered off to bed. I did not quite like the idea of stealing out of the house at the dead of night and going alone to see the ghost. So I suggested to my schoolfellow that he should also break loose one night and accompany me to Rownam to see the White Lady. It was, however, of no use. Much as he would have liked to have seen a ghost in broad daylight, it was quite another matter at night, to say nothing of running the risk of being caught trespassing by the inveterate enemy, Sir E.C. At length, finding that neither persuasion, bribery, nor taunts of cowardice had any effect on my schoolfellow, who could not decide which appearance would be more appalling, for he assured me I should be certain to encounter either one or the other, the White Lady or the Lord Devil, I gave up all further effort to induce him to accompany me, and made up my mind to go to Rownam Avenue alone. Biding my opportunity, and waiting till my father was safely out of the way and on a visit to Greenock, where some business transaction would oblige him to remain for some days, I climbed out of my bedroom window, when I deemed the rest of the household to be sound asleep, and scudded softly across the fields, and, making short work of the lofty wall that formed the southernmost boundary of the Rownam estates, quickly made my way to the avenue. It was an ideal Sunday night in August, and it seemed as if all nature participated in the Sabbath abstraction from noise and work. Hardly a sound broke the exquisite silence of the woods. At times, overcome with the delightful sensation of freedom, I paused and, raising my eyes to the starry heavens, drank in a huge draught of the pure country air, tainted only with the sweet smell of newly mown hay and the scent of summer flowers. I became intoxicated, delirious, and in transport of my joy, and threw myself on the soft, mossy ground, and, burying my throat and chest, bathed myself in the moonbeam's kisses. Then, picking myself slowly up, I performed the maddest capers, and finally, sobering down, continued my course. Every now and again, fancying I detected the stealthy footsteps of a keeper, I hid behind a tree, where I remained till I was quite assured I had been mistaken and that no one was about. How long did I dally, I don't know, but it must have been fully 1 o'clock before I arrived at the outskirts of the avenue, and advancing eagerly, ensconced myself in my favorite sanctuary, the hollow oak. All was hushed and motionless, and as I gazed into the gloom, I became conscious, for the first time in my life, of a sensation of eeriness. The arched canopy of foliage overhead was strongly suggestive of a funeral pall. Not a glimmer of moonlight penetrated through it, and all beneath seemed to me to be buried in the silence and blackness of the grave. The loneliness got on my nerves. At first I grew afraid, only afraid, and then my fears turned into a panic, a wild, mad panic, consisting that one desire to get where there are human beings, creatures I knew and understood. With this end in view, I emerged from my retreat and was preparing to fly through the wood when, from afar off, there suddenly came the sound of a voice, the harsh, grating voice of a man. Convinced At this time I had been discovered by a keeper. I jumped back into the tree and, swarming up the other side of the trunk, peeped cautiously out. What I saw nearly made me jump out of my skin. Advancing along the avenue was the thing I had always longed to see, and for which I had risked so much, the mysterious, far-famed Lady in White, a ghost, an actual, bona fide ghost. How every nerve in my body thrilled with excitement, and my heart thumped, till it seemed on the verge of bursting through my ribs. The White Lady! Why, it would be the talk of the whole countryside. Someone had really, no hearsay evidence, seen the notorious apparition at last. Oh, how my schoolfellows would envy me, and how bitterly they would chide themselves for being too cowardly to accompany me. I looked at her closely, and noticed that she was entirely luminous, emitting a strong phosphorescent glow like the glow of a glowworm, saving that it was in a perpetual state of motion. She wore a quantity of white drapery swathed around her in a manner that perplexed me sorely, until I realized, with a creeping of my flesh, that it must be a winding sheet, that burial accessory so often minutely described to me by the son of the village undertaker. Though interesting, I did not think it at all becoming, and would have preferred to see any other style of garment. Streaming over her neck and shoulders were thick masses of long, wavy golden hair, which was ruffled, but only slightly ruffled, by the gentle summer breeze. Her face, though terrifying by reason of its unearthly pallor, was so beautiful that had not some restraining influence compelled me to remain in hiding, I would have descended from my perch to obtain a nearer view of it. I, indeed, only caught once a glimpse of her full face, for, with a persistence that was most annoying, she kept turning it from me. But in a brief second, the luster of her long blue eyes won my very soul, and, boy, as I felt like a hero in a song, that I would for my bonny ghost, in very deed, lay me down and die. Her eyes are still firmly impressed on my memory. I shall never forget them, any more than I shall forget the dainty curves of her full red lips and the snowy whiteness of her perfect teeth. Nothing, I thought, either on earth or in heaven could have been half so lovely, and I was so enraptured that it was not until she was directly beneath me that I perceived she was not alone, that walking by her side, with one arm around her waist, his face and figure illuminated with the light from her body, was Sir E.C., but how changed! Gone were the deep black scowl, the savage tightening of the jaws, and the intensely disagreeable expression that had earned for him the nickname of the Lord Devil, and in their stead I saw love, nothing but blind, infatuated, soul-devouring love, love for which no words can find an adequate description. Throwing discretion to the wind, for my excitement and curiosity had risen to the highest pitch, I now thrust more than half my body out of the hole in the trunk. The next instant, with a cry of dismay, I pitched headfirst onto the ground. It would seem that boys, much like cats, cannot in ordinary circumstances be killed, and instead of breaking my neck, I merely suffered that most immaterial injury, immaterial at least in my case, a temporary disendowment of the senses. On regaining the few wits I could lay claim to, I fully expected to find myself in the hands of the irate lord who would seize me by the scruff of the neck and belabor me to pieces. Consequently, too frightened to move, I lay absolutely still with my eyes shut. But as the minutes glided by and nothing happened, I picked myself up. All was quiet, and pitch dark, not a vestige of the White Lady, not a vestige of Sir E.C. It did not take me long to get out of the wood and home. I ran all the way, and as it was still early, far too early for any of the household to be astir, I crept up to my bedroom unobserved, but not to sleep. Oh, dear me, no. Not to sleep. Not for a moment. I blew out the candle and got into bed. Reacting set in, and I suffered agonies of fear. When I went to school in the morning, my equilibrium restored, and bubbling over with excitement to tell the boys what had happened, I received another shock. Before I could say a word of my experiences, I was told with a roar and shout that almost broke the drum of my ears, that the old Lord Devil was dead. His body had been found stretched on the ground a few feet from the hollow oak in the avenue shortly after sunrise. He died from syncope, so the doctor said, that probably had been caused by a shock, some severe mental shock. I did not tell my companions of my night's adventures after all. My eagerness to do so had departed when I heard of the old lord's death. If you like these stories, please subscribe, like, and share. And don't forget to hit that notification bell. The end.